The Duran penthouse has never known peace, only the sterile, terrifying order of a criminal empire. Between the constant hum of the security monitors, the hushed whispers of maid men in the hallways, and the cold metallic snap of Chantan's gold lighter, the silence was always a weapon. But tonight, the silence is different. It is deafening. It's all because of the man standing over Kayla's bed. Peng Ko, the silent shadow, the hulking bodyguard with skin mapped in Yakuza-style ink, stands motionless while Chantan watches them from the threshold. Chan, the Black King of the Seoul underworld, stares at his most trusted enforcer through narrowed eyes, his tuxedo sharp enough to draw blood. Chan breaks the silence first. He doesn't scream. He speaks with a velvet-wrapped lethality, asking Kayla if this is the man she chose to warm his sheets while he was away cleaning up the docks. Kayla's breath hitches, the white duvet trembling in her grip as she realizes the man she just shared her soul with is a stranger. Peng, his massive chest still heaving, finally looks at his boss and responds with a chillingly calm voice. He tells Chan that technically, he wasn't just warming the bed, he was securing the evidence currently locked in the vault behind him. Before we begin, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm responding to everyone. Click subscribe, like this video. Your support helps us bring more thrilling stories, and trust me, you won't want me to miss them. Let's begin. The first time Kayla noticed the difference was 3 months ago, when Chan stopped touching her altogether. Not that he'd ever been particularly affectionate. The Black King didn't do softness, didn't do vulnerability. But there had been moments, brief flickers of humanity in the dark. His hand at the small of her back during gullas, the way he'd pull her close after particularly bloody nights, seeking something she could never quite name. Absolution, maybe. Or oblivion. Then it all stopped. Chan began leaving before dawn, and returning after midnight, his tuxedo crisp, his gold lighter clicking open and shut in that maddening rhythm that told her his mind was elsewhere. The penthouse became a mausoleum of marble and money, every surface gleaming and cold, every corner monitored by cameras that captured everything except the truth. He'd brush past her in the hallway without a word, his cologne, bergamot and gunpowder, the only evidence he'd been there at all. Business, he'd say when she dared to ask. The docks need attention. Always the docks. Always blood that needed washing, deals that needed sealing, territories that needed defending. The Seoul underworld was a hungry beast, and Chan fed it everything, including the woman he'd married in a ceremony that felt more like a merger than a union. Kayla learned to stop asking. She learned to fill her days with yoga classes she didn't attend, charity events she didn't care about, shopping trips that left her with bags she never opened. The penthouse had everything, except warmth. Everything except him. That's when she started noticing Peng Ko. He'd always been there, of course. Chan's shadow, his right hand, the silent enforcer who cleared rooms with nothing more than his presence. 6'3" of controlled violence, his neck and forearms covered in the traditional irizumi that marked him as something dangerous, something other. The ink told stories Kayla couldn't read. Dragons coiling around peonies, koi swimming upstream against impossible currents, a phoenix rising from ashes on his shoulder blade. She'd catch glimpses of it when he rolled up his sleeves, when he checked the perimeter, when he stood guard outside her door like some ancient sentinel, and she'd wonder what kind of man wore his sin so beautifully on his skin. The shift happened gradually, so subtle she almost didn't notice. Peng began appearing when Chan disappeared. Not obviously. He was too professional for that, too loyal. But he'd be there in the kitchen at 2 in the morning when insomnia drove her from bed, making tea with hands that could break bones but moved with surprising delicacy. He'd hand her the cup without a word, steam rising between them like a question neither dared to ask. He'd drive her to appointments Chan forgot, opening the car door with a slight bow that felt more courtly than servile. He'd stand outside dressing rooms while she tried on clothes for events her husband wouldn't attend, offering opinions in that low, gravelly voice that seemed to rumble up from somewhere deep and ancient. The blue one, he'd say. It makes your eyes look like the ocean before a storm. Chan had never noticed the color of her eyes. The conversation started small. Weather, traffic, the quality of the coffee. But they grew, filling the spaces Chan left empty, threading through the silence like gold through marble. Peng told her about Seoul before the blood, about growing up in Itaewon when it was still rough around the edges, about the grandmother who taught him to make kimchi and never asked about the tattoos. Kayla found herself talking too, spilling secrets she'd kept locked away. Her childhood in California, the father who gambled their house away. The moment she realized marrying Chantan was less about love, and more about survival dressed up in Vera Wang. Peng listened without judgment, his dark eyes steady, his silence somehow more comforting than any platitude. She told herself it was just loneliness, that she was simply grateful for human connection in a house that had forgotten how to be human. But then there were the touches. His hand steadying her elbow when she stumbled in heels, His jacket draped over her shoulders when the penthouse air conditioning made her shiver. The way he'd stand too close in the elevator. His heat seeping through the space between them. His breath ghosting across her temple. The moment his fingers brushed hers while passing her phone, lingering half a second too long. And last night, when Chan texted that he'd be gone another week, when the penthouse silence became suffocating, when Peng knocked on her bedroom door at midnight with eyes that said he was tired of pretending, she let him in. She let him in and told herself the darkness made him Chan, that the hands mapping her body were her husband's hands, that the mouth claiming hers belonged to the man she'd married. She'd needed it to be Chan. But it wasn't. It never was. The bullet shattered the bedroom window 3 seconds after Chan left the doorway. Kayla didn't scream, couldn't scream, because Peng's hand was already clamped over her mouth, his body driving her to the floor as glass rained down like crystalline snow. The white duvet that had covered her modesty moments ago now tangled around her ankles as he dragged her behind the bed, his muscles coiled with the kind of readiness that came from years of surviving exactly this kind of chaos. "Stay down," he growled, but his eyes weren't on her. They were tracking the red laser dots dancing across the ceiling, counting targets, calculating odds. Chan's voice echoed from somewhere in the penthouse, cold and controlled even now. "Peng, you have 60 seconds to bring her out before I let them redecorate my bedroom with your insides." The laser dots multiplied. 5, 7, 10. They crawled across the walls like luminescent spiders, each one connected to a finger on a trigger, each trigger connected to men who'd proven their loyalty to the Black King in blood. Peng's jaw tightened, the dragon on his neck seeming to writhe in the stuttering light from the security monitors. He reached under the bed. Of course he'd stashed weapons here, probably had them hidden in every room, and came up with a matte black Glock and something smaller, a compact pistol he pressed into Kayla's trembling hands. "Do you know how to use this?" She shook her head, then nodded, remembering the single firearms lesson Chan had insisted on after the Park family tried to kidnap her last year. Peng's eyes softened for a fraction of a second, something almost like regret flickering there, before the professional mask slammed back into place. "Safety's off. Point and shoot. Aimed for center mass." He paused, his hand cupping her face with surprising gentleness. "And Kayla? Don't hesitate. These men won't." The bedroom door exploded inward, kicked off its hinges by a man in a black suit with a neck tattoo that marked him as one of Chan's inner circle. Peng put 2 rounds in his chest before he could raise his weapon, the silencer reducing the gunshots to wet coughs that somehow sounded more violent than a proper bang. Then they were moving. Peng hauled her up by her arm. She was still in nothing but Chan's shirt, the one she'd worn to bed thinking it smelled like her husband, not realizing it probably smelled like gun oil and lies, and pulled her toward the walk-in closet. Not to hide. To escape. The back panel of the closet swung open at his touch, revealing a service corridor Kayla never knew existed. Of course Peng knew about it. He'd probably memorized every exit, every weak point, every escape route in this gilded cage the moment Chan assigned him to her detail. "How long have you been planning this?" she gasped as they ran, her bare feet silent on cold concrete. "Since the moment I realized I couldn't stay away from you." His voice was rough, honest in a way that made her chest ache. "I'm sorry, Kayla. For all of it." The service corridor led to the hotel's mechanical floor. The Duran penthouse occupied the top 3 stories of Seoul's most exclusive hotel, a detail that had seemed romantic when Chan first brought her here. Now it felt like a prison designed by someone who understood that the best cages came with room service and a view. They burst into a hallway lined with industrial pipes and humming electrical boxes, the ambient noise loud enough to cover their footsteps, but not loud enough to hide the shouts behind them. Chan's men were coming, pouring into the service areas like water finding cracks. Peng fired twice over his shoulder without looking, trusting muscle memory and instinct. Someone screamed. Someone fell. The wet sound of impact echoed off concrete. "The freight elevator," Peng said, dragging her around a corner. "It goes straight to the parking garage. I have a car waiting. You have a car waiting." Kayla's laugh came out hysterical, sharp-edged with terror and adrenaline. "How long have you been planning to run?" "Since the moment I kissed you and realized I'd chosen you over everything else." He slammed his palm against the elevator call button, eyes scanning the corridor as the machinery groaned to life somewhere above them. "Chan's not going to forgive this. Either of us. You understand that, right?" She understood. The Black King didn't do mercy. He did examples. The elevator doors opened with a cheerful ding that sounded obscene in the violence-soaked air. Peng shoved her inside, followed, jabbed the button for the garage level. The doors began to close. A hand shot through the gap. Tattooed knuckles. A ring she recognized. And the doors bounced back open. Kayla raised her gun and fired. The safe house smelled like old cigarettes and failure. It was nothing like the penthouse. No marble, No floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Seoul's glittering skyline, no security monitors humming their constant surveillance. Just a cramped studio apartment in Hongdae, the kind of place where university students and struggling artists pretended bohemian poverty was a choice. Water-stained ceiling, flickering fluorescent light, a mattress on the floor that had seen better decades. Kayla stood in the center of the room, still wearing Chan's shirt, now spattered with blood that wasn't hers. Her hands wouldn't stop shaking. The man in the elevator, Chan's lieutenant, a career criminal named Do-Yun who'd always leered at her during family dinners, wouldn't stop bleeding in her mind. She'd shot him in the shoulder. Not center mass like Peng taught her, but close enough. Close enough that he dropped, screaming, as the elevator doors finally closed. "Drink this." Peng pressed a glass of soju into her hands, his fingers warm against her ice-cold skin. She drank without tasting, the alcohol burning down her throat like penance. "We killed him. You wounded him. I killed the 3 who came after." Peng said it without inflection, stating facts the way someone might comment on the weather. He'd stripped off his jacket during the drive, leaving him in a black t-shirt that clung to his frame, revealing the full scope of the ink that covered his arms, his shoulders, disappearing beneath the fabric. "And they would have killed us without hesitation. Don't waste guilt on men like that." "Men like you mean?" The words came out sharper than she intended, fear curdling into anger now that the adrenaline was fading. "You're one of them. Chan's enforcer. His right hand. His surveillance." Peng cut her off, his dark eyes meeting hers with an intensity that made her breath catch. His mistake. He moved to the grimy window, checking the street below with the paranoid precision of someone who'd spent years looking over his shoulder. The neon signs from the bar across the street painted his face in alternating shades of red and blue, making him look like a different person with each flash. Stranger. Familiar. Dangerous. Safe. "I need you to understand something," he said quietly. "Everything you think you know about me is a lie." Kayla laughed, the sound brittle and broken. "Join the club. Apparently I don't know anything about anyone. My name isn't Peng Ko." He turned from the window, and in the neon-fractured darkness, he looked almost vulnerable. "It's Agent Kang Min-jun, Korean National Intelligence Service. I've been embedded in Chan's organization for 3 years." The glass slipped from her fingers, shattering on the concrete floor. Soju spread across the ground like spilled secrets, the sharp scent mixing with cigarette smoke and fear. "You're a cop." Her voice came out flat, dead. "You're a fucking cop. Intelligence operative, technically, but yes." He didn't move toward her, giving her space to process, to decide if he was another betrayal in a night built from them. The NIS has been building a case against Chan Tan for years. Money laundering, arms trafficking, connections to the Yakuza and the Triads. But he's careful, paranoid. He keeps everything compartmentalized, uses proxies and shell companies, and offshore accounts that disappear into legal black holes. Then why? Kayla's mind was racing, trying to reconcile the man who'd made her tea at 2 a.m. with the lie he'd been living. "Why get close to me? I don't know anything about Chan's business. He doesn't tell me anything." "Because you were never the target, Kayla." Peng, no, Min-jun, crossed to her slowly, the way someone might approach a wounded animal. "You were my way in. My cover. The grieving bodyguard falling for his boss's neglected wife. It's a tale as old as organized crime." The slap cracked across his face before she realized she'd moved, her palm stinging, his head snapping to the side. He didn't stop her, didn't raise a hand to defend himself, just stood there and took it, a red mark blooming across his tattooed jaw. Except somewhere along the way, it stopped being cover. His voice was rough, honest in a way that made her want to hit him again, or kiss him, or both. "Somewhere between the tea and the conversations, and the way you looked at me like I was human instead of a weapon, I forgot I was supposed to be acting." Bullshit. But even as she said it, she knew it wasn't. Knew it in the way he'd touched her last night, reverent and desperate. Knew it in the way he'd positioned his body between her and every bullet. He reached for the hem of his shirt, pulling it over his head in one fluid motion. The tattoos she'd glimpsed covered his entire torso. Dragons and phoenixes and koi. Traditional Irizumi work that must have taken years. Beautiful, painful, permanent. "Look closer," he said. She did, and hidden in the scales and petals and flames, rendered in the same ink but subtly different shading, were numbers. Account numbers. Routing codes. GPS coordinates. A living ledger of Chan's criminal empire, inscribed on the skin of the man sent to destroy him. The broadcast went live at 4 a.m. when Seoul was caught between the drunks stumbling home and the early risers heading to work. Kayla watched it on Min-jun's laptop, the screen's glow turning her face corpse pale in the safe house darkness. Chan sat behind his desk at the penthouse, the same desk where he'd signed their marriage certificate 3 years ago, looking every inch the legitimate businessman in his charcoal Tom Ford suit. Behind him, Floor-to-ceiling windows framed the city like a kingdom he owned. Which in many ways he did. My wife Kayla Tan has been abducted. Chan's voice was smooth, controlled, the perfect blend of concern and authority. No hint of the cold fury she'd seen in his eyes when he'd found her in bed with Min Jun. The man responsible is a former member of my security team who has proven to be dangerously unstable. I am offering 50 million won, approximately $40,000, for any information leading to her safe return. Min Jun swore in Korean, something guttural and vicious. He's playing it smart, he muttered, pacing the small room like a caged animal. Makes you the victim. Makes me the villain. Every cop in Seoul will be looking for us now, and not because they want to help. But Chan wasn't finished. He leaned forward, and for just a moment, the mask slipped. His eyes went flat and dead, the eyes of a man who'd built an empire on fear and fed it with blood. However, the word hung in the air like a blade. I have reason to believe my wife may have been complicit in this situation. If evidence emerges that she left willingly, that she betrayed our marriage vows and our family honor, the offer changes. 100 million won for her return. Alive or dead, I am not particular. The screen went dark. Kayla's stomach lurched. 100 million won. Nearly $80,000. In a city where the average monthly wage was barely 3 million won, Chan had just made her the most valuable target in Seoul. He's going to flood the zone. Min Jun was already moving, pulling burner phones from a hidden compartment in the baseboard, checking ammunition and magazines with the mechanical efficiency of a man who'd done this 1,000 times. Every gang, every desperate gambler, every street-level hustler looking for a payday, they'll all be hunting now. We need to move. We need to. His phone buzzed. Not the burner, his real phone, the one he shouldn't still have. He glanced at the screen and went very still. What? Kayla's voice came out thin, reedy. My handler. At the NIS. He read the message again, his jaw tightening. I'm being pulled. They're calling the operation a loss. Too much exposure, too much risk. There's an extraction team waiting at the embassy, but what? But the offer is just for me. He looked up, and the anguish in his eyes was so raw it physically hurt to witness. They can't protect you, Kayla. You're a civilian. A foreign national. If they harbor you, it becomes an international incident. Chan has too many connections, too many politicians in his pocket. They're offering asylum to their asset. Not to his. His what? His mistake? She laughed, the sound edging toward hysteria. The collateral damage in your undercover operation? I'm not leaving you. Min Jun said it with such finality that it almost sounded like a wedding vow. I don't care what the NIS says. I don't care about the extraction team, or the embassy, or finishing the mission. You're not dying because I couldn't keep my hands to myself. Outside, Seoul was waking up. She could hear the city's pulse beginning to quicken, delivery trucks rumbling through alleys, subway trains screeching into stations, the eternally optimistic chime of convenience store doors. Somewhere out there, people were checking their phones over morning coffee, seeing Chan's broadcast, seeing her face plastered across every news site and social media platform, seeing the price on her head. How long do we have? She asked quietly. In Hongdae? Maybe 2 hours before someone recognizes you. This neighborhood's crawling with students. They're broke, they're online, and $80,000 looks like salvation when you're living on ramen and student loans. He grabbed a backpack, started shoving clothes and cash into it with brutal efficiency. We need to get out of Seoul entirely. Head south, maybe. Busan has ports. We could. The window exploded inward. No warning. No bullet. Just a brick wrapped in newspaper, crashing through the glass and landing on the floor between them. Min Jun had his gun out instantly, pointing at the empty window frame, but the street below was already empty. Whoever threw it was gone. Kayla picked up the brick with shaking hands. Unwrapped the newspaper, written in red marker across the sports section, in handwriting she didn't recognize. We know you're here. Tick-tock. They ran for 40 minutes before Min Jun deemed it safe enough to stop. The abandoned PC Bang, one of Seoul's ubiquitous internet cafes, sat wedged between a shuttered Norabang and a restaurant that looked like it hadn't served food since the 90s. The neon sign had died years ago, leaving just a ghost of letters in Korean and English. Cyberzone. Min Jun picked the lock in under 30 seconds, and they slipped inside to the smell of stale energy drinks and the particular loneliness that clung to places where people used to gather. Dust covered everything. The computer monitors sat like dead eyes in rows, their screens reflecting nothing. Min Jun did a perimeter check, habit, instinct, the survival mechanism of a man who'd lived too long in the spaces between identities, while Kayla collapsed into one of the worn gaming chairs, her legs finally giving out. She was still wearing Chan's shirt, still barefoot, still had someone else's blood under her fingernails. Here. Min Jun draped his jacket around her shoulders, the leather still warm from his body. We'll wait until sunrise. Move during rush hour, when there are too many faces for anyone to pick ours out of the crowd. Smart. She pulled the jacket tighter, breathing in the scent of him. Gun oil and mint, and something earthier. More honest than Chan's expensive cologne ever was. Is that what they taught you at spy school? How to hide in plain sight? They taught me how to become whoever I needed to be. He sat on the floor in front of her, his back against the counter that used to hold energy drinks and instant ramen. In the dim emergency lighting from the exit sign, the tattoos on his arms looked almost alive, the dragons seeming to coil with each breath. How to lie so well I'd believe it myself. And who are you now? The question came out quieter than she intended. When you're not being Punkho the bodyguard, or Agent Kang the spy. Who is Min Jun? He was silent for a long moment, his dark eyes studying her with an intensity that made her feel seen in a way Chan never had. Finally, he spoke. Tired. The word came out rough, honest. I'm so fucking tired of pretending, Kayla. 3 years in Chan's organization. 3 years of watching him parade you around like property. Watching him ignore you. Watching him treat you like another asset to be managed and guarded. Do you know how many times I wanted to put a bullet in him just for the way he looked through you at dinner parties? That wasn't part of your mission. No, that was just me being human. He ran a hand through his hair, disheveling the careful style. The mission was simple. Get close to Chan. Document everything. Build an airtight case. Bring down the Black King and his entire operation. But then you complicated things. I complicated things? Kayla let out a bitter laugh. I didn't ask you to make me tea at 2 a.m. I didn't ask you to actually listen when I talked. I didn't ask you to look at me like you mattered, Min Jun finished, his voice soft. Like you were more than just Chan Tan's wife. More than the pretty American he married to legitimize his empire? Because you are, Kayla. You always were. She felt tears burning behind her eyes, hot and unwelcome. Don't do that. Do what? Say things that make me want to believe you. She wiped at her eyes with the back of her hand, angry at her own weakness. I can't tell what's real anymore. Was any of it real? The conversations? The touches? Last night, when you... She broke off, unable to finish. Min Jun moved then, rising to his knees in front of her chair, close enough that she could see the faint scar on his collarbone, count the shades of ink that mapped his skin. Last night was the realest thing I've done in 3 years, he said, each word deliberate, weighted. I knew it would blow my cover, knew it would compromise the mission, knew it would probably get us both killed. And I did it anyway because the alternative, walking away, pretending I didn't feel this, letting you spend one more night alone in that marble tomb, was worse than any bullet Chan could put in me. That's insane. Yeah, his mouth quirked in something that wasn't quite a smile. Turns out I'm not as good at compartmentalizing as the NIS thought. Turns out some things matter more than the mission. Kayla reached out, her fingers tracing the phoenix on his shoulder, following the curve of flame and feather. Hidden in the design, she could now see numbers, coordinates maybe, or account information. His entire body was a testimony, a weapon forged from pain and ink and purpose. Does it hurt? She asked, carrying all of this? Every day. He caught her hand, pressed it flat against his chest where she could feel his heart hammering. But not as much as losing you would. The truth hung between them in the darkness of the dead PC bang, honest and terrifying and impossibly fragile. Outside, Soul was hunting them. Chan's bounty was climbing. The NIS had abandoned them. Every hour brought them closer to a bullet or a blade or a cell. But for this moment, in this forgotten place, they were just two people who'd found something real in a world built on lies. I don't even know what to call you, Kayla whispered. Call me Min Jun. He leaned his forehead against hers, close enough that she could feel his breath. Just Min Jun. That's all I want to be. The plan was suicide dressed up as strategy, and they both knew it. Min Jun spread a hand-drawn map across the dusty counter of the PC bang, his finger tracing a route that looked simple on paper, but would require the kind of precision that left no room for mistakes. Chan keeps the physical ledger in a briefcase. Japanese leather, combination lock, never leaves his sight except when he's sleeping or when he's conducting business in the war room. Kayla finished, remembering the countless nights Chan had disappeared into the soundproofed conference room on the penthouse's second floor, emerging hours later with blood on his cufflinks and deals signed in violence. He leaves it in his office during those meetings. Says he doesn't want distractions. Exactly. Min Jun's jaw tightened. The ledger is our insurance policy. Every transaction, every account, every offshore shell company, it's all in there. Chan's old school. Doesn't trust digital records completely. Says computers can be hacked, but a man's handwriting in a locked case is his bond. His bond is going to get us killed. Only if we fail. He looked up at her, and despite everything, the bounty, the bullets, the impossible odds, there was something almost like hope in his eyes. The NIS wants evidence. I give them the ledger, they give us protection. Witness security, new identities, a life somewhere Chan's reach doesn't extend. There's nowhere Chan's reach doesn't extend. But even as she said it, Kayla felt something stirring in her chest. Not quite hope, not yet, but maybe the memory of what hope used to feel like. They moved at dawn, when the city was thick with commuters, and the security teams would be changing shifts. Min Jun had called in a favor, some contact from his previous life, a forger who owed him blood or money or both. And now Kayla carried a fake ID that said her name was Park Ji-won, English teacher, nobody special. She tucked her blonde hair under a black wig, covered her eyes with cheap glasses, dressed in the kind of modest business casual that made her invisible. Min Jun wore a maintenance uniform, complete with a toolbox that held more weapons than tools. The Duran Hotel greeted them with the same obsequious efficiency it showed everyone, the doorman bowing without really seeing them, the lobby staff too busy with their own tasks to notice two more faces in the morning rush. They took the service elevator, the same one they'd escaped through, and Kayla's hand shook as the numbers climbed. "Breathe," Minjun murmured. "You're just a teacher coming to fix a rich student's computer, bored. Annoyed you had to come this early. You belong here." She tried to believe him. The penthouse was different in daylight. The marble floors gleamed without menace, the security monitors silent, the whole space feeling almost normal. Almost like a home instead of a crime scene waiting to happen. Minjun moved with the casual confidence of someone who'd walked these halls 1,000 times, nodding to the guard stationed outside Chan's private office. "Maintenance," he said in Korean, his accent flawless. "President Tan called about his computer. Said the monitor keeps flickering." The guard, young, new, someone Kayla didn't recognize, looked uncertain. "I didn't receive any notification. Check your messages." Minjun's voice carried just the right amount of irritation. "I've got 6 other calls today. You want to tell the Black King his computer's not fixed because you didn't read your texts?" The guard paled, pulled out his phone, stared at a message that Kayla knew Minjun had spoofed somehow, some technical trick from his NIS training. "Right. Yes. Sorry. Go ahead." They were in. Chan's office smelled like bergamot and leather, and the particular brand of paranoia that came with running an empire built on sand and blood. His desk was obsessively organized, pens aligned, papers stacked with military precision, the gold lighter sitting exactly center on the blotter. The briefcase sat beside his chair, innocent and deadly. Minjun went to work on the combination lock, while Kayla stood watch at the door, her heart hammering so hard she was sure the guard outside could hear it. The seconds stretched like hours. Somewhere in the building, Chan was sleeping, or showering, or planning their deaths with the same methodical care he brought to everything. "Got it." The briefcase clicked open. Inside, nestled in burgundy velvet, was a leather-bound ledger that looked almost medieval. Hand-stitched binding, pages thick with ink and secrets. Minjun pulled it out, started photographing each page with a camera so small it looked like a pen cap. That's when Kayla heard the footsteps in the hallway. Not the guard. These were different. Heavier, more deliberate. The kind of footsteps that announced themselves as a warning, that said someone important was coming and everyone else should scatter. She knew those footsteps, had heard them echo through the penthouse for 3 years. Chan was awake. Minjun, she breathed, but he'd already heard, was already moving, shoving the ledger back into the briefcase, closing it, resetting the combination with fingers that moved too fast, fumbling. The lock didn't catch. The door opened. Chan Tan stood in the threshold, wearing a black silk robe and an expression that could have frozen hell. Behind him, 4 of his personal guards materialized, like shadows given form. In his hand, the gold lighter clicked open. Closed. Open. Closed. "Did you really think," Chan said softly, his eyes moving from the briefcase to Minjun to Kayla, with the slow precision of a man cataloging his revenge, "that I wouldn't be watching my own office?" The briefcase hit the floor, its contents spilling across Chan's imported Italian marble. The ledger, some loose papers, a burner phone Chan had been using for off-books deals. Minjun didn't reach for his gun. Didn't move, just stood there with his hands visible, playing the angles, calculating odds that didn't exist. "Chan," his voice was steady, almost conversational, "this isn't what it looks like." Chan laughed. The sound was worse than his anger. Hollow, genuinely amused, the laugh of a man who'd already written the ending to this story and was just waiting to watch it play out. "No. Then please, enlighten me. What does it look like when my bodyguard and my wife break into my office at dawn to steal my private documents?" The guards fanned out, professional and efficient. Kayla recognized two of them from dinners, parties, the carefully choreographed performance of Chan's legitimate life. Their guns were out but lowered, waiting for the order. It looks like a man trying to save the woman he loves from a monster wearing Armani. Minjun's tone shifted, dropping the maintenance worker persona entirely. But you already knew that, didn't you? You've known for weeks. 3 weeks and 4 days, to be precise. Chan moved into the room with a predatory grace that had first attracted Kayla at that charity gala years ago, back when she'd mistaken danger for excitement. Since Agent Kang Min-jun here started getting sloppy, making tea at inappropriate hours, lingering too long outside bedroom doors, looking at my wife like she was something other than my property. Min-jun's jaw tightened at the word property, but he didn't take the bait. I let it continue, Chan said, crouching to pick up the ledger with almost loving care. Curious to see how far you'd go, how much you'd risk. The NIS trained you well, but not well enough to hide from someone who's built a career on reading people's weaknesses. Kayla's blood went cold. You knew he was NIS. For 6 months. Chan's smile was a razor blade. Did you think I survived this long by trusting anyone completely? I had Agent Kang investigated the moment he came to work for me. Found his real identity in under a week. The NIS cover was adequate, but I have resources that make their intelligence network look like children playing dress-up. Then why? Min-jun started. Why keep you around? Chan finished. Because you were useful. Because I wanted to know what the NIS knew, what they were after, how close they were. And because watching you fall for my wife was, he paused, considering, entertaining. I've always enjoyed watching people destroy themselves over things they can't have. The lighter clicked. Open. Closed. The sound punctuated each revelation like a metronome counting down to execution. The extraction point, Chan continued, pulling out his phone, is the embassy, correct? 3 blocks from here. Your handler, Agent Park I believe, arranged for a car at 0800 hours. Just for you, of course. The NIS doesn't protect civilians. Doesn't protect American women who make poor marital choices. He pulled up a video on his phone. Showed it to them. The footage was grainy but clear enough. Min-jun's handler, Agent Park, sitting across from someone in a dark sedan. Money changing hands. A briefcase, different from Chan's, newer. Park's face was calm, professional, making a deal with the devil in a parking garage somewhere in Seoul. Agent Park has been on my payroll for 8 months, Chan said. He's the one who told me about your little safe house in Hongdae, about the PC bang, about the extraction plan. Every move you made, I knew about 5 minutes later. Min-jun looked like he'd been gutshot. You're lying. Am I? Chan gestured to one of his guards, who produced a tablet. More video. Park and Chan's, sitting in this very office, discussing Min-jun's cover, his mission parameters, his growing attachment to Kayla. All of it captured in high definition, time-stamped, undeniable. The NIS is a bureaucracy like any other, Chan said. Underpaid agents, budget cuts, pension concerns. Agent Park has a daughter at Seoul National University. Medical school isn't cheap. I offered him more money in one payment than he'd make in 5 years of government service. The choice was simple. Kayla watched Min-jun's face crumble, watched 3 years of deep cover work and sacrifice, and loneliness crack like ice under pressure. This was worse than bullets. This was the particular cruelty of knowing every risk, every moment of vulnerability, every brave choice had been theater performed for an audience who already knew the ending. So what now? Min-jun's voice was hollow. You kill us both? Make it look like a murder-suicide? The unstable bodyguard and the unfaithful wife? Kill you? No. Chan's smile widened. I'm going to let you go. The silence that followed was more terrifying than any threat. You'll walk out of here, Chan continued, with nothing. No ledger. No evidence. No career. The NIS will disavow you. Park is already filing reports about your compromised judgment, your unprofessional conduct. You'll be branded a traitor who blew his cover for a woman. No other agency will touch you. He turned to Kayla, and his eyes went dead. But she stays. My wife. My property. My example. Min-jun moved then, reaching for his weapon, but the guards were faster. They had him on the ground in seconds, his face pressed against the marble. Gun kicked away, hands wrenched behind his back. Let her go, Chan, Min-jun growled. This is between us. She's got nothing to do with. She has everything to do with it. Chan crouched beside Kayla, gripping her chin with fingers that would leave bruises. She chose you. In my bed. In my home. She made me look weak. And in my world, weakness is death. He stood, straightening his robe. Take Agent Kang to the lobby. Make sure the security footage shows him leaving peacefully. I want the NIS to know their agent failed. That he traded his integrity for a woman who isn't even his to keep. The guards hauled Min-jun up. He fought. God, he fought. But there were 4 of them, and his weapon was gone, and fighting now would just mean dying now instead of later. Kayla. Her name ripped from his throat like a prayer. "I'll find you," she said, surprised by the steadiness in her own voice. "I swear to God, I'll—" Chan backhanded her. The crack echoed in the quiet office. She tasted blood. "No," Chan said pleasantly. "You won't." They dragged Minjun away, and Kayla heard him shouting her name all the way to the elevator. Then it was just her and Chan and the guards, and the morning light streaming through bulletproof windows. "Welcome home, wife," Chan said, clicking his lighter one final time. "Let's discuss what happens to women who forget their place." The call came 3 days later, during the longest 72 hours of Minjun's life. He'd been living in his car, a decade-old Hyundai that smelled like cigarettes and desperation, parked in different neighborhoods each night, moving before dawn, surviving on convenience store kimbap, and the particular brand of self-loathing that came from failing everyone who'd ever trusted him. The NIS had frozen his accounts, disavowed him officially. Agent Park had filed a report painting him as emotionally compromised, reckless, a liability who'd blown years of work for an asset's wife. They weren't wrong. His phone, the burner he'd kept against protocol, against common sense, against every rule he'd broken since the night he first kissed Kayla, buzzed with an unknown number. "Agent Kang." Chan's voice was smooth, almost friendly. "Or should I call you Minjun? I feel we're past formalities at this point." Minjun's hand tightened on the phone. "If you've hurt her, she's alive. Uncomfortable, but alive. I've kept her in the penthouse, though not in the bedroom we used to share." That seemed inappropriate, given recent events. There was a smile in Chan's voice, the particular cruelty of a man who knew he'd already won. "She asks about you, late at night, when the sedatives wear off. It's almost touching." "What do you want, Chan?" "The same thing I've always wanted." "What's mine?" The levity dropped from Chan's voice, replaced by something colder, more honest. "You took something from me, Agent Kang. Not my wife. I never particularly wanted her, if I'm being truthful. She was always just window dressing, proof that the Black King could acquire beautiful American things. But my dignity, my reputation, the whispers in the organization that Chan Tan couldn't even keep his own woman satisfied? That I cannot abide. So kill me. Put a bullet in my head and be done with it. Where's the poetry in that?" Chan laughed. "No, I have something more elegant in mind. A trade. The ledger you photographed. Yes, I know about the photographs. Park told me everything. For the girl. Your evidence for her life. Simple, clean, poetic even." Minjun's mind raced. The photographs were his only leverage, the only thing keeping him alive. He'd backed them up to an encrypted cloud server, sent copies to a dead drop, insurance in case the NIS came to their senses. Without them, he had nothing. Chen could disappear him and Kayla both, dump their bodies in the Yellow Sea, and no one would even file a missing persons report. "How do I know you'll honor the deal?" "You don't." Chan's honesty was almost refreshing. "But you know what happens if you don't take it. I have creative people working for me, Agent Kang. People who understand that death is sometimes a mercy. People who can make 3 days feel like 3 years. Do you want to risk Kayla experiencing their particular talents?" The image hit Minjun like a physical blow. Kayla in pain, Kayla afraid, Kayla dying slowly because he'd chosen evidence over her life. "Where?" His voice came out rough. "The Incheon docks. Warehouse 17. You remember it. We did that deal with the Yakuza there last year. You were there, playing bodyguard, taking mental notes for your NIS handlers." Chan paused. "Come alone, come unarmed, come at midnight tonight. Bring every copy of those photographs, every backup, every insurance policy. I have people watching you, Agent Kang. If I even suspect you've contacted the police, the NIS, anyone." She dies screaming. The line went dead. Minjun sat in his car, watching Seoul's traffic crawl past his windows, each vehicle full of people living normal lives. People who didn't have to choose between justice and love, between duty and survival. He thought about calling the NIS anyway, about trying to salvage the mission, about the hundreds of victims who'd suffered under Chan's organization, and the hundreds more who would if the ledger disappeared. Then he thought about Kayla's face in the emergency lighting of that dead PC bang, the way she'd looked at him like he was human instead of a weapon. The choice wasn't even close. He spent the afternoon gathering every copy of the photographs, every backup drive, every insurance policy he'd created, deleted the cloud files, destroyed the dead drops, erased 3 years of work in 4 hours, watching his mission turn to digital ash. The Incheon docks at night were a cathedral of rust and salt air, container ships looming like sleeping giants, the water black and infinite beneath a moonless sky. Warehouse 17 sat at the far end of the commercial district, Isolated enough for privacy, close enough to the water for easy disposal of evidence. Or bodies. Min Jun arrived at 11:45, a USB drive containing every photograph in his jacket pocket, his hands empty, his weapon left in the car. The warehouse door was open, spilling yellow light across cracked pavement. He walked toward it like a man, walking toward his own execution. Inside, Chan waited with a dozen guards forming a perimeter. And in the center, tied to a metal chair with professional efficiency, was Kayla. She looked smaller than he remembered. Thinner. There were bruises on her arms, shadows under her eyes, but she was alive. When she saw him, something broke in her expression. Relief, and horror, and love and grief all tangled together. Minjun, no, she said. Don't. Chan backhanded her casually, the way someone might swat a fly. Quiet, wife. The men are talking. Minjun took a step forward, rage igniting in his chest. But 6 guns tracked his movement. He froze. The USB drive, Chan said, holding out his hand. Every photograph. Every copy. I want to watch you delete them. Want to see 3 years of work disappear. Minjun pulled out the drive, held it up. Let her go first. Do you think I'm stupid? Chan smiled. You delete the files. I verify they're gone. Then, maybe, I let her walk out of here. Your word means nothing. True, but it's all you have. The standoff stretched, tension coiling tighter with each second. Then Kayla spoke, her voice steady despite the blood on her lip. Do it, Minjun. Please. Just do it. He looked at her, really looked at her, and saw something in her eyes. A message. A plan. Or maybe just goodbye. Minjun pulled out a laptop Chan's guards had brought, plugged in the USB drive, and started deleting files. One by one, 3 years of evidence disappeared. The first file deleted with a soft electronic whisper, 3 months of surveillance photographs vanishing into the digital void. Chan watched the progress bar with the same focused intensity he brought to all his business dealings, the gold lighter clicking in his free hand. Open. Closed. Open. Closed. Min Jun's finger hovered over the next batch of files. Bank transfers, wire receipts, the financial skeleton of Chan's empire. He glanced at Kayla, trying to read the message in her eyes, but she'd gone very still in the chair, her breathing shallow and controlled. Faster, Chan said. I have a meeting at 2 a.m. Arms dealers, from Vladivostok. They don't appreciate being kept waiting. Min Jun deleted another folder. Then another. The laptop screen reflected in his eyes like a funeral pyre. Everything he'd worked for, burning down to ash and code. He was down to the last directory. The photographs of the ledger itself, the handwritten records that would have buried Chan Tan so deep he'd never see daylight again. His finger hesitated. Having second thoughts, Agent Kang? Chan stepped closer, near enough that Min Jun could smell the bergamot cologne, see the slight tremor in his hand that suggested he wasn't as calm as he pretended. Wondering if your evidence is worth more than her life. It's an interesting philosophical question. Does justice matter more than love? Does the greater good outweigh personal salvation? Just let her go. Min Jun's voice cracked. Please. I'll delete everything. I'll disappear. You'll never hear from me again. Oh, I know I won't. Chan's smile was a knife. Because after you delete those files, my men are going to put bullets in both your heads and dump you in the harbor. Did you really think I'd let either of you live? That I'd let you walk away to tell stories about how Chan Tan was cuckolded in his own home? The guards shifted, weapons rising slightly. Min Jun saw his death in their eyes, professional and inevitable. But he also saw something else. Kayla's hands weren't tied as tightly as they'd appeared. The rope around her wrists had slack, not much, but enough. And her eyes weren't looking at Min Jun anymore. They were tracking something behind Chan, measuring distance, calculating angles with the same precision Chan brought to his empire building. She'd been working on the ropes for 3 days, patient, methodical, waiting for exactly this moment. You know what your mistake was, Chan? Kayla's voice cut through the warehouse, clear and cold and nothing like the frightened woman she'd been pretending to be. You assumed I was just another pretty American who needed saving. That I was decoration, property, something to be guarded and kept, and eventually disposed of. Chan turned to face her, eyebrow raised. And you're going to tell me you're something more? That you're secretly dangerous? Kayla darling, you're a charity case from California who married into money. You're not. She moved. The ropes fell away and Kayla lunged sideways, her hand closing around the gun holstered on the guard standing closest to her chair. The man was fast. Chan hired professionals, but Kayla was faster, driven by 3 days of captivity and 3 years of being invisible, and 1 night of realizing she'd spent her entire adult life letting men decide her fate. Not anymore. She put 2 rounds in Chan's chest before anyone could react. The Black King of Soul's underworld stumbled backward, surprise and pain, and something almost like respect flickering across his face. The gold lighter fell from his hand, clattering against concrete, its metallic rhythm finally silenced. "You," he managed, blood spreading across his white silk shirt like a blooming flower. "I'm done being your wife," Kayla said. Then she shot him again. The warehouse exploded into chaos. Guards shouting, weapons rising, Minjin diving for cover behind a concrete pillar. But Kayla didn't freeze. She moved like someone who'd been watching professionals for 3 years, learning, absorbing, understanding that survival in Chan's world meant being willing to pull the trigger first. She shot the guard whose gun she'd stolen, muscle memory, no hesitation, then used his body as a shield as she put rounds toward the others. Not trained, not perfect, but desperate and angry and absolutely done with being saved. Minjin had his weapon out. He'd lied about coming unarmed. Of course he had, the gun taped under the laptop chassis. And he was moving too, covering Kayla's blind spots, his training taking over. They fought like they'd been doing this together for years, like the conversations at 2 a.m. and the touches in elevators had been preparing them for exactly this partnership. The firefight lasted 90 seconds, felt like 90 hours. When the smoke cleared, Chan's guards were down, some dead, some wounded, all neutralized. Chan himself lay on his back, staring at the warehouse ceiling with eyes that would never track another target, never calculate another deal, never click another lighter. Kayla stood over him, the gun trembling in her hands now that the adrenaline was fading, reality crashing in. "I killed him," she whispered. We killed him." Minjun pulled her against his chest, his heart hammering against her back. "We survived him. There's a difference. The NIS will get their evidence." Minjun gestured to the laptop, still running, still connected to the USB drive. The deletion had stopped at 70%. The most damaging files remained. Chan wanted to watch me destroy my work, but he forgot to check if I was actually deleting or just moving files to a hidden partition. Old spy trick. Despite everything, Kayla laughed. The sound was slightly hysterical, but genuine. They had maybe 10 minutes before someone noticed the gunfire, before police arrived, before Chan's organization mobilized. Minjun grabbed the laptop and Kayla's hand, and they ran. The Inchin docks swallowed them into darkness, into salt air and fog, and the infinite possibility of ships that went everywhere, anywhere, somewhere that wasn't here. 3 months later, a couple named David and Sarah Park opened a small cafe in Vancouver. He made excellent tea. She had a talent for pastries. Neither of them talked much about their past, though sometimes customers noticed the faded tattoos on David's arms, the way Sarah's hands still shook when sirens passed by outside. They held each other at night and built something real from the ashes of their lies. And in Seoul, the NIS finally brought down the remnants of Chantan's empire, using evidence provided by an anonymous source. Agent Park was arrested for corruption. The docks were raided. The organization crumbled. Justice came slowly, but it came. And somewhere in Vancouver, in a cafe that smelled like coffee and second chances, 2 people who'd chosen each other over everything else learned how to stop looking over their shoulders. Most days, they even succeeded. Thanks for watching. Please like, comment, and subscribe.